So each of us is comprised of DNA. The DNA are the instructions which created us and which determine who we are, our physical and non-physical characteristics. Now this DNA was inherited from our parents, so we've got a percentage of our father's DNA and mother's DNA. So their looks, their characteristics, but also their personality types, how they behave, habits, and so on. Now DNA is just energy, like everything is energy. It can be changed through your own mental conditioning. The physical, obviously, harder to change in theory. Actually, probably not in theory. In theory, they're probably both equal, but in our beliefs, physical harder to change. It is still compact energy than, for instance, our beliefs and behaviors. Thing is, if you then look back at your grandparents, you've also inherited their DNA, their characteristics, their life history, with all the DNA that we inherit, their life history, their triumphs, their hardships, their ego, their grief, anxieties, all the wars they've been through, our great grandparents, great grandparents, all the traumas they've been through, which have been undealt with, and at the point where where the DNA is transferred over to their children, if it's still undealt with and it comes through undealt with, become our problems, but also all their strengths as well, whether they're good at art or maths or their genius, for instance. So positives and negatives, we can call them positives or negatives. You can even call it good or bad, good or evil, whatever you want to call it. It's just vibrational frequency, lower or higher vibrational frequency. So these have continued to be passed down, and if you trace it back generation to generation, eventually you're going to come to a point, the point of creation of the human species and the DNA of those two beings. So many stories as to how this goes, or basically being told in different ways, but basically to create a being or a species, you need DNA from two other species, unless there's some other way of creating a being. But if you're looking back at your holy books, and also particularly the Sumerian stone tablets, where it's been carved in stone tablets, which are, I don't know how many, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands years old, which was dug up in Sumeria, which I think is somewhere in the Middle East, Iraq, possibly, and it's all being kept under wraps by mainstream media, but they have been deciphered, decoded, or translated from that language, which may have been Hebrew, just off the top of my head, possibly Hebrew. And there are books available on the translations of these stone tablets, and also which include, the Great Flood and the serpent at the time of Adam and Eve. Well, they don't call it Adam and Eve in the Sumerian tablets, but you see the similarities. You know what stories they're talking about, and then other books have then come and given their variations and translations, interpretations on these same stories. So the way it's appearing, like I said, somewhere along the line a human species was created, so it'll all, if you look at us and then there's our grandparents, our parents, their parents and their parents, and this goes on and on, just spreads out, but it has to come back in, and it'll come back in to a point where there's two beings or two sets of DNA creating the human species. So one of these talks about a rib, DNA being taken from a rib, and then you've got a female which at the time on this planet was inhabited by a Neanderthal species, like a caveman species, whereas the rib is another species which was already working on this planet or mining this planet. I think they're called the Anunnaki, but they come under different names. And so the DNA was taken from one, combined with the other, and the human species was born, which is a combination of the Neanderthals and another more intelligent, highly intelligent, interdimensional species. Then you have to look at, okay, so we've got the DNA from the rib of this species, and we'll just call them the Anunnaki. Every culture has a different name for them and talks about them. But we've also got the DNA, the characteristics, the in our blood, our brain, reptilian brain. We've got all their traumas, dramas, whatever evil or good they have within them is all been passed down through the DNA as well. And then from the Neanderthals themselves, we've got their, for instance, their strength, their musculature, their ability to adapt to different climates. And that's one of the reasons their DNA was used for their strength, which would help the other species, the Anunnaki, with the project they were undertaking on the planet, which was mining, and they needed a workforce that were strong but also intelligent. So the Neanderthals were strong but not intelligent. They couldn't follow instructions. So they experimented for a long, long time. I don't know how many, there was thousands of years, with different prototypes of a being that would be able to help them. They were already mining, but they wanted to get it going faster, get more mining done. So they used their intelligence, which is this 12-strand DNA structure. However, they turned off all the higher abilities, like the intuitive abilities, the interdimensional abilities. They turned those off to leave us with just the two basic strands in the human species, so we can just work, reproduce, eat, and just have a basic function. It is possible to turn on the other strands. You need to do it through spiritual practices. You may already be doing that, even not knowing you're doing spiritual practices, for instance, meditation, but you can start reactivating them. Many people started to reactivate a long time ago and started to become more intuitive, and you can see the other strands of DNA activating and them developing higher abilities, which is actually all already possible and within our DNA. It just hasn't been turned on. So as you keep following this species back, you'll realize that the reptilian or the Anunnaki species was created somewhere along the line, probably by two other forms of species, one variant of the Anunnaki and another species. So all our triumphs, all of our traumas, all of our characteristics have also come through. Some have come through them. The Neanderthals were created from something as well, two species. So we've inherited all of their everything, all their experiences, traumas, triumphs, the memories of them, and also the emotional reaction that we get from them. So let's say somewhere along the line, one of the Neanderthals, and we've inherited some of their DNA, was chased by a dinosaur, went through some extreme trauma. Well, you might now have a fear of a certain type of large animal, for example, and not know why. So we'll start seeing that over the however millions of years, we've inherited the DNA and characteristics, traits, personalities from really every species that's lived, because you have to trace all these back, and each species created by another species, and it just keeps tracking all the way back to basically the beginning, or to source, or the universe, or God, depending on what belief system you are. So it all comes back to the very beginning of whatever was created initially, the first atoms which were combined together to create life, and their experiences as they evolve. If it was created that way, or a species, a being, may have just been created by source instantaneously or over time. And we also contain all the memories and DNA of that species, and source itself being where we were from initially. So we contain all of source DNA or energy, because energy is DNA, everything is energy. So this is going back, tracing the physical, through physical lives. But then each of us also separately is also a combination of all our past lives. So again, all our, particularly our non-physical characteristics, our personalities, why we like this, why we don't like this, why we behave like this. A lot of it's come through from our past lives as well. For instance, this is an example that I'm familiar with. If you've been afraid of the ocean and water, some types of large water bodies, and you've never known why, and then you find out later, or have an intuition, that you drowned in a past life. It may have been 800,000 years ago in Lemuria, for example. Then that's all been passed down to you as well, from each life. It's been passed through all your lives. Every life you come back down, reincarnate into a new body as a new child. You get all these past experiences and traumas, and again strengths and victories, all passed down through to you. So for each of your past lives, which on this planet, it's been suggested, I think Dolores Cannon says average 120. Some people a lot more, because they just don't learn their lessons. And someone else said up to 300. So just as a ballpark, the number of lives on average that a person may have on this planet for this Earth school experience, to get through all the levels and all the experiences and lessons. So for each of those lives, you've inherited the traits and DNA, energy in your DNA, and memories, right through your body, through your bone, blood, everything, all your organs. It's all stored in there, which means you can actually remember everything from every past life, and from all our physical predecessors, our ancestors. So back to these non-physical, or I should say physical lives, but we'll call them just past lives. So for each past life, say in a past life, the life before you came into this life, you had parents, and you also got their DNA, and they had past lives, and you've got the DNA of their past lives as well. So you start to see that everyone is connected. You can just keep working it further back. And with our past lives, as Dolores Cannon has channeled many times when she's put her clients under hypnosis, she'll go back to lives before they actually incarnated as humans sort of right at the end, the most developed. I wouldn't say the most conscious, but the most developed. So before we're humans, we experience a series of lives as animals, and before that as plants, and before that as minerals. I can't remember the exact order, like crystals, for instance, sand, which are minerals, and lives before that start to go back to probably single-celled organisms. And also she channeled people who were explaining lives as wind and water. So we're going back into the elements now. So I mean the minerals include like a metal, and then wind and fire. I can't remember if she channeled past lives on fire, but she probably did, or someone has. So you start seeing, okay, so they're all past lives, so we inherit DNA through them, which has been passed down as well, right through generation to generation. So we start seeing that we are connected and part of and have the memories of everything. Animals, the plants, we've been them, we are them, water, amoebas. So we're all energetically all connected, all species, all planets, all the way back to source, all animals, all plants, all life forms, all the way back to, again, probably some single cell or even smaller organism back at the time of creation, the time when source created everything. And as everything is energy, and we're all connected, we've just seen that. An example of how we're all connected, we're actually just all one big huge energy field. So the universe itself, we are the universe itself. We're not separate, we're just vibrating at a lower frequency at the moment. We're just a point of consciousness. We're not even, I mean, we can call ourselves a being, but the universe is the being. We're a point of consciousness within a field of consciousness, or a field of energy. And we're all our energy is all connected into one. We just have awareness at this point of time in a human body. Another point of time, we have awareness, source awareness, consciousness, universal awareness in a gemstone. So I guess this little explanation just shows that everything is one. We are all are one, all related. We contain the memory of everything that ever existed and everything that ever exists. And what you see going on around you in this planet, there's good and evil, or you can say high and low frequency. Whatever we do to each other, we're doing to ourselves, because it's all happening to that might happen a million miles away, but it's also happening energetically to us, because we're all connected, and our DNA is inheriting that as well. So another thought that I had, which I've been thinking about for a while, was about negative and positive, good and bad, hell and heaven, that sort of duality concept. But we have to take everything back down to what it is, energy. So energetically, there's just different frequencies, high and low frequency, or higher and lower frequencies. So if there was anywhere where the frequency was just always high, that area doesn't evolve, it just stays constant, because it needs a lower frequency to bring it down into a lower frequency, so that then it can expand into a higher frequency. For instance, as a human, if everything's perfect, we just live a life and we don't evolve. We stay quite stagnant as a soul. But then we hit with situations, sickness or loss of job or COVID, or the whole COVID situation. Someone dies, marital issues, and then we get knocked down into a lower frequency. We go through the grief, trauma, anger, depression, and we're held down there for a while by the lower frequencies until we can then learn, expand, do some soul searching, think about life, think about what really matters, and pull ourselves with some help, usually, pull ourselves out of that situation into a higher frequency that we were before. So we continually are dropping, then expanding up, raising, dropping, raising, dropping, raising. But overall, the trajectory is upward. So we're always expanding, but we needed the negative experiences. We'll call them negative, but nothing is actually negative, because if you look at your trajectory, in the end, whether it be this life or another life, it's always moving upward. So overall, it's all been positive. Looking back, it's all positive because it all results in a positive. So the negatives that pull us down are just to propel us up higher. But overall, when you look back, you'll just see how you've expanded and grown, because the universe itself is always expanding and growing in experience. And our experience contributes to the universe experience, because we are part of the universe, and we are the universe, and the universe is us. So everything in the universe, because of the nature of the universe itself, which is expansion, everything in the universe has to go through expansion, or those areas will be static. So they may be static for hundreds of thousands and millions of years, but eventually they will evolve to keep up with the overall narrative of expansion. So there's always a positive and a negative. We see in the cartoon someone with an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other shoulder. Which one are you going to feed with your thoughts and actions and what you consume, what you watch? Eventually the negative will get into your ear at times, especially when you're going through hard times. Best time for the negative thoughts, influences, entities to convince you that that's the way, or you should do something negative. When you're down and depressed, you're at the vibrational frequency of the lower frequencies. You're at the lower frequencies, and then the lower frequencies are lower frequency beings that would love to keep you down at their frequency so that they can have a physical experience through your body, which is also called various things, such as having an attachment, affecting your thoughts, emotions, control you at times, also known as demonic possession, if it's that lower frequency being, which makes it very hard to get out of those low frequency states. But still, we all know it is possible, and you need to vibrate yourself up so high that they can't attach, these attachments can't attach to you anymore. The times that they can are the times that when you get emotionally knocked down into lower states again. So there's always a positive and a negative, and we need the negative to expand so that you can see it in humans. You can also see it in dimensions, which I didn't realize till probably 5 years ago, or I had read about it, but it didn't really sink in. So Earth, most of us, or all of us live on Earth, which is regarded a third dimensional planet, in the process of moving to the fifth dimension. So it is actually, it's not really a third dimensional planet anymore. It's maybe more fourth to fifth dimensional planet. And this has all happened, it's happening over about 20 years, the major shift from about 2012, which was predicted by many cultures, and the Mayan calendar ended 2012, to about 2032, the full shift, and we're at 2022 now, so right in the middle. There's a lot of turbulence at the moment as things are changing, and you can see it on the news, and I wouldn't believe everything on the news, but you'll know there's a lot of turbulence happening at the moment. So some people are living still in the third dimension, as in their reality, or their what would you call it? their reality is still third dimensional, which is in the lower frequencies, particularly the people that watch the news and believe the news. They're still living in the fear, hate, and think of all the lower, depression, all the lower vibration emotions and physical manifestations. And then there are people that turned the news off a long time ago, and doesn't affect them anywhere near as much. They may be moving more through the fourth dimension, just as a guess, because they don't feel that fear as much. Some do. For instance, if you've run out of money, you're going to feel that fear and helplessness and all those lower emotions, even if you are aware of the shift and have taken a sort of a more spiritual path of evolution. You can still be knocked down, because unfortunately in the third dimensional reality, you need money to survive or to prosper, or a certain amount of it at least to pay for your rent or a house and food. So then there are people on the planet already who have moved to the fifth dimension. So they're still here with us all, except their life, their reality is very different to others. They're more in a place of peace, harmony, happiness. They may not have much physical belongings. They may. I mean, that's got really nothing to do with it. It's really what it comes down to. When it's got, money does have something to do with, your ability to purchase things and be healthy. But what I mean, in their mental state, it's got nothing to do whether they've got a lot of money. For these particular fifth dimensional people, the people that have already made the shift, everyone will make the shift, but it will take, I don't know how many 100 years of lifetimes coming back. But some have already completed their lifetimes on this planet, and they're already on the planet somewhere, living in peace, harmony, and happiness, even if they only have enough money just to keep them going from day to day. So their mindset is basically totally different to the people that are still living in the third dimensional reality, who are experiencing the lower emotions most of the time, where the people in the fourth dimensional reality are not allowing and not experiencing the lower emotions as much. They're experiencing more of the higher emotions: joy, happiness, peace, gratitude. Bit of a mix for them. And those in the higher dimension, or the fifth, where the planet itself has moved, are experiencing the higher emotions most of the time. And as negative situations approach, they're able to get over them rather quickly and less intensely. So they're hit with anger. Someone's done something, and they can feel this anger, let it pass through them, because I understand how energy works. It's just a vibrational emotion passing through them, release it, so it can be less intense and last for not as long in the body, which means it hasn't got as much time to manifest into something physical, such as a disease like cancer. Whereas people that hold on to these things, someone's done something to them, anger or grief, they hold on to them and haven't learned how to let it pass through and be released. Well, these low frequency emotions can only manifest into low frequency things in the physical. So we're talking disease and mental health problems and terrible situations in their life. Okay, so as I learnt some time ago, to move from the third dimension to the fourth to the fifth, each dimension, so we know on the third dimension there's your positives and your negatives. So it's sometimes called polarity. So there's a lower third dimension and a higher third dimension. Lower fourth dimension, higher fourth dimension, lower fifth, and this must continue on, because I can see it's a pattern, the polarity pattern. The polarity is what allows beings in that dimension to expand and grow, because if it was just all positive, so let's say the fourth dimension was just all positive polarity, then they're stuck at that polarity. There's no evolution to get to the fifth, sixth dimension. So there's a negative polarity as well, and that's what keeps poking the beings in the fourth dimension to keep expanding and growing. So even if you worked your way up to, let's say, whatever the dimensions of the frequency range of heaven is, there still has to be a positive and a negative polarity, because everything's expanding. It's not like it just stops. I'm a heaven, it stops. No, the universe is expanding. So there are, and I've heard of the higher dimensions, I think like 14, 15, which I only thought it went up to 9, but no, it has to go on infinitely. Whether you say 9 and above is heaven or whatever the breakup is, I don't know if anyone's actually labelled it, because that's all it is. It's a label. Heaven could be from the fifth dimension upwards, where you're experiencing the majority of time higher, happier, joyful life and emotion. Also brings us back to the story of heaven and a dark being cast out of heaven. So how can there be dark beings in heaven or negative angels in heaven? I thought heaven was a place of unconditional love, and there's no evil there at all. But if there's a positive and negative polarity, well, then there can be a negativity in the negative, in the lower. So let's say heaven, the 9th dimension, or we can call it the 100th dimension. Let's say that negativity or the lower 9th dimension has some highly evolved beings that have evolved to that point, but still at that negative polarity. And then you got the positive polarity, and that could explain the story of I think it's when you have the fallen angel who had a falling out in heaven, which I thought a negativity can't exist. Well, if you look at this, the duality of each dimension and of each person, well then it probably can exist. And we're trying to get to evolve to through the fourth into the fifth. Well, not, we don't even have to try. Everyone will. Just depends if it's sooner or later, but whenever it is, and that's when it's meant to be. So there's a lower fourth dimension, and then the higher fourth dimension. So we obviously would prefer to move from the Earth's higher third dimension to the higher fourth dimension. But there are beings in the lower fourth dimension, which are, we can say, not positive beings, negative beings, such as where these Anunnaki came from. So they were here before us, they created us, and they still control us from the lower fourth dimension, as David Icke explains and others have explained. So they control the top, the elites, and everything, all the major events that happen on the planet from the lower fourth dimension. So, obviously we don't see them as good beings, but they're at a higher dimension than we are.